In the middle of a quiet night shift, chaos erupted in the hospital corridors as a wild wolf suddenly broke through the entrance. The fear was immediate, nurses and doctors alike froze in terror, unsure of how to react. One nurse, Emily, found herself in the thick of it. She was one of many who fled in panic, her heart racing as the creature made its way down the hallway. The sight of the wolf, its fur matted and eyes gleaming, sent shivers down her spine. The entire nursing staff was gripped by instinctive fear. Some screamed, others bolted for safety. Yet, amidst the frantic retreat, Emily's sharp eyes noticed something strange. The wolf wasn't snarling or lunging. In fact, it was holding something delicate in its jaws. As Emily's eyes focused, her trembling hands settled. Was it a small animal? No one else seemed to notice as panic overtook the room. Security was already evacuating the hospital, ordering everyone to clear out. They shouted commands, drawing their weapons, preparing to take the wolf down. But Emily, despite her fear, realized that the wolf wasn't there to attack. There was something gentle about the way it was handling the object in its mouth. She hesitated, her instinct telling her to wait, to understand the situation more clearly. "Stop," Emily called out, her voice shaky but firm. "Wait, it's holding something," but no one listened. Fear had taken over. Emily knew if she didn't act fast, something terrible would happen. Gathering all the courage she could muster, she cautiously stepped forward. The wolf's yellow eyes locked onto hers, and for a split second there was an unspoken understanding. As Emily neared, she could see it more clearly, a small, fragile puppy dangling from the wolf's mouth. Her breath caught in her throat. What was happening? Why would a wild wolf bring a puppy here? The answer was in the wolf's eyes. There was no malice, only a plea for help. The wolf wasn't here to harm. He was trying to save the tiny creature, to find its sanctuary in the only place he could think of. In an instant, Emily made a split decision. She let out a sharp scream, enough to startle the wolf without harming it. The wolf flinched, dropping the puppy gently onto the cold hospital floor. For a moment, it stood still, staring at Emily with what she could only describe as gratitude, before turning and fleeing into the night. The room fell silent. Emily rushed to the puppy's side, her hands trembling once more, but this time it wasn't out of fear. She quickly examined the little creature, realizing that it was malnourished and weak, likely abandoned in a trash heap somewhere before the wolf found it. The puppy, its tiny chest rising and falling rapidly, whimpered softly. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. The wolf had brought the puppy here, knowing it needed help. In that moment, she understood the animal's desperation. It wasn't wild instinct driving it, but compassion. The hospital's chaos slowly subsided as security realized the wolf had left. But Emily's focus was now entirely on the puppy. She cradled it gently, whispering reassurances as she rushed it to the veterinary unit. The small creature was safe now, and thanks to both the wolf and Emily, it would survive. Weeks later, the puppy, now healthy and playful, became a beloved member of Emily's family. She named him Shadow in memory of the mysterious wolf that had defied all expectations. Every time she looked at Shadow, Emily couldn't help but think back to that fateful night. It was a story of fear, courage, and unexpected kindness, one she would never forget. And if you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with others. You never know when kindness, whether from a human or a wolf, might change everything. As days turned into weeks, Emily often found herself reflecting on the surreal events that had unfolded that night at the hospital. Shadow, the once frail puppy, had transformed into a vibrant bundle of energy, full of life and love. His coat, now glossy and strong, shimmered under the sunlight whenever they went for walks. Emily couldn't help but feel a deep connection to him, this little creature that had come into her life under the most unexpected circumstances. The story of the wolf and the puppy became something of a legend among her colleagues at the hospital. Some were still in disbelief, unable to comprehend the bizarre occurrence. Others whispered that the Wolf was more than just an animal, it was a guardian of sorts, delivering the puppy to safety as if it knew where to go. One evening, after her shift, Emily sat on the porch of her small home, watching Shadow play in the yard. The sky was painted with hues of pink and orange, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves in the trees. She couldn't help but wonder about the Wolf. Where had it come from? What drove it to bring the puppy to the hospital? And more importantly, was it still out there, roaming the wilderness? Shadow paused from his play, lifting his nose to the air. His ears perked up, and he stared intently toward the forest at the edge of the property. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She followed his gaze, but saw nothing. The thought of the Wolf being nearby sent a chill down her spine, but it wasn't fear she felt, it was curiosity. Was the Wolf checking on them, or had it simply moved on, leaving behind this incredible chapter in her life? A soft whine from Shadow brought her back to the present. He padded over to her, resting his head on her lap. She stroked his fur, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. Whatever the Wolf's intentions had been, it had changed both of their lives. Emily smiled to herself, grateful for the bond she now shared with Shadow, a bond that never would have existed without the mysterious intervention of the Wolf. One day, as she was leaving the hospital after another long shift, something caught her eye. Standing just at the edge of the woods, barely visible in the twilight, was a dark silhouette. Her heart raced, but not out of fear. The figure was unmistakable, the same Wolf, watching her from a distance. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The Wolf's eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, locked onto hers. There was no aggression, no menace, just a quiet, knowing gaze. Emily felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She didn't know why, but she believed the Wolf had returned to check on Shadow. As if satisfied, the Wolf slowly turned and disappeared into the forest, its dark form swallowed by the trees. Emily stood there for a moment, her heart full. She knew she would likely never see the Wolf again, but it didn't matter. Their story had already been written, and it was one she would carry with her for the rest of her life. It was a reminder that kindness and connection can come from the most unlikely places, whether from a wild Wolf or a frightened nurse. As the months passed, life settled back into its usual rhythm for Emily, though she often found herself thinking about that fateful night and the mysterious Wolf that had forever changed her perspective on life. Shadow grew into a healthy and loyal companion, always by her side, and together they became inseparable. But deep down, Emily knew that their story wasn't quite over. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Emily and Shadow were taking their usual walk near the edge of the forest, something felt different. The wind carried a strange stillness, and Shadow, usually playful and bounding ahead, was unusually quiet, walking close to Emily's side. His ears flicked nervously, and his nose twitched, picking up a scent that only he could detect. Emily slowed her pace, scanning the tree line, her heart beginning to race. There, just barely visible between the trees, she saw a flicker of movement. Her breath caught in her throat. Could it be? She stood still, waiting, her mind swirling with memories of the Wolf from months before. And then, out of the shadows, the Wolf appeared, but this time it wasn't alone. Beside the Wolf, two smaller figures stepped into the clearing. Wolf pups, their fur still scruffy and their movements hesitant as they explored the world around them. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. The Wolf had brought its family. Shadow let out a soft bark, wagging his tail in excitement, but stayed by Emily's side as if sensing the importance of the moment. Emily's heart swelled with emotion. The Wolf had come back, not out of desperation this time, but to show her something precious. It was as though the Wolf wanted to thank her, to share a part of its life in return for the kindness she had shown. For a few long moments, they stood there, Emily, Shadow, the Wolf, and its pups sharing an unspoken connection. The air was thick, people with understanding, a bond that transcended fear and instinct. Emily couldn't help but smile, her eyes filling with tears. She realized that the Wolf hadn't just saved the puppy that night in the hospital, it had formed a connection with her, one that stretched beyond the boundaries of the wild and the human world. The Wolf looked at her one last time, its yellow eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. Then, with a low growl to its pups, it turned and slowly disappeared into the forest, its young ones following close behind. Emily stood there, her heart brimming with a mix of awe and gratitude. As Shadow nuzzled her hand, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This encounter wasn't just a chance moment, it was a gift. The Wolf had returned, not for help, but to share its world with her, to show her that kindness, once given, can come back in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. Later that evening, as she sat by the fire with Shadow curled up at her feet, Emily reflected on the journey they had been on. Life had a strange way of weaving stories together, connecting lives that seemed destined never to meet. She had helped the Wolf, and in return, it had given her something far greater than she could have imagined, a deeper understanding of the wild, of life, and of the bonds we share with all living creatures. It was a story she knew she would carry with her forever, and one she would tell for years to come. Not just a tale of fear or survival, but one of compassion, trust, and the powerful connections that exist between all beings, no matter how different they may seem. And so, with a contented sigh, Emily whispered softly to Shadow, "We're part of something bigger, you and I, and it's all thanks to that Wolf." If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with those who believe in the beauty of unexpected friendships and the quiet magic of the natural world.